How you guys doing? Nice. Where's our clicker? So, if you set a goal or a resolution in the last year or so, stand up. Gotta stand. Okay. This is about the same representation of companies that offer wellness programs to their employees. So, nice. Now, remain standing if you've maintained that resolution. You wait a minute, they still keep sitting down. See how that works? So you guys are doing better than the average employee participation in wellness programs. Remain standing if you have achieved all of the goals that you set. You represent the measured financial return on wellness programs. Because guess what? The data is not there. So let's talk about wellness past and present. We're going to do a little bit of a history test. And is there a future? So let's talk about the need. What is it that we experience? So workplace stress responsible to up to $190 billion in annual U.S. healthcare costs. Anybody here feel stress?
Oh my God.
Right? Here's why workplace stress is costing employers $300 billion a year. $300 billion a year. These are articles you take right out of Forbes, right out of Harvard Business Review, the high price of workplace stress. Presenteeism costs businesses 10 more times than absenteeism. Who knows what presenteeism is? Yes, ma'am. Answer.
It's people who are at work, but they're not at work mentally.
Yes. They're there, but they're not really there. Now, we all have a day where we're there and we're not really there for different reasons. But a lot of the time when people are present but not working, it's because they are not completely well. And when you talk about workplace wellness, that is what we're talking about. Part of what's not in my introduction, going back to my time at Pfizer, I was part of an industry-wide coalition that was involved in the original design of what became the American Affordable Care Act, 2008. All the contribution we put into it, none of it showed up in the final bill, but you learn a lot around companies and organizations and what it is, this notion of what health and wellness is supposed to be about. So we've been talking about it now for 10 years. You guys have been talking about it probably longer than that. But presenteeism is one of those costs. The average company loses about 1 to 2 days of employment per person in a given year because they're sick and they don't show up. Times that 10, you get presenteeism. And that's the folks that you know when you show up into the office and you look at it and you go like, you really shouldn't be here. Oh, I came anyway. Burnout comes. Anybody heard about burnout? Employers need to recognize that wellness starts at work. How many of you guys have got a wellness program of any kind at your employer? It's a positive, you better. Who else? Okay. And what's an example of something that you do? What's an example of something that you do? Your wellness program.
Chair yoga.
Chair yoga. Very nice. What else?
We bring massage therapists.
Bring the therapy in. Nice. What else?
Massage Friday.
Massage Friday. What else?
Tai Chi.
Tai Chi. What else?
Zumba.
Zumba. At work.
Step challenges.
Step challenge. So we've got different practices that we have. This is more about absenteeism. By the way, how many of you have got people who travel for work in your company? How many of you have got one heck of a horrible commute? Nobody? None of you guys have bad commutes? Man, I'm moving to Broward. The cost of business travel on people is an increasing rate in terms of cardiovascular disease, other stress-related diseases, diabetes, obesity, all these things. And the more we ask of people, the more at risk they are of these chronic diseases. But here's the problem. This is from Harvard Business Review. Corporate wellness programs lose money. That's just what the data tells us. Recent policy, the Republicans' wellness bill is going to give employers power to make choices around what they're going to offer people based on genetic data. Oh boy. Corporate wellness programs make us unwell. What's the hard return on employee wellness programs? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I don't know if you want me asking questions in the middle, but I'm curious how they measure it. Like, what loses money? Like, how do they measure lost money?
That is a great question. And that is part of the biggest challenge of the whole thing. Is that when you look at like Rand Institute studies, so what they've done is they look at the cost of bringing a program into the organization, total cost of delivery, and total cost of productivity time for the people to participate in the program. And then you look at a hard return generally over 5 years.
Or less decrease in absences?
Or increase in productivity, whatever the core measures are that they pick. Productivity is a real tough one to get. Mostly what you get is cost of disease. So really what you're getting at is the cost to your employer-sponsored health plan. That's the biggest thing that when they say, well, what's the return? They say, well, how much less am I having to spend, especially if I'm self-insured? How many big employers, how many people work for a company that's got more than 1,000 people? Okay. Oh, the guys, smaller companies? Okay, so you got a mix. So you've got some self-insured folks here, you've got some folks who are not. But basically that's one of the ways you look at it. What's my total reduction of health insurance spend?
So it's the health insurance you're looking at, not necessarily increasing revenue?
No, because
It's hard to tie that.
it is. You really can't tie, which is really interesting because I've had conversations. My wife and I were meeting with the head of HR for a very large U.S. insurance company. And we were talking about performance and wellness, including the topic of mindfulness, which you'll hear more about later today. And the conversation was, what's the return on mindfulness? And I said, well, I don't know. Because you've come into this room and you don't know? And I said, well, do you do diversity training? She said, yeah. I said, what's your return? I don't know. I wasn't very popular after that point, so we didn't get the business after that, so don't do that. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, wouldn't you think that wellness would just be a cost of doing business?
Hold that thought.
In order to make money, you have to spend money.
Hold that thought. That's a great question. We're going to come back to it. Yes.
Okay, so 2 comments. One, I think that although it's not measurable, employee loyalty increases with those, and the cost of turnover is huge. And then the other part is some of these things, if you're not self-insured, it's almost impossible to measure the medical, it's like not trackable.
You're exactly right. And those are valid, fair, and good points. And by the time we get done, we're going to talk about, well, what is practical and real for us here in Broward County or wherever it is that you do your job. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, I hadn't looked at this in a long time, but years ago I had been doing research on like ROI for wellness programs. And the research was saying for every $1 that you spend on preventative care, you get back $3 in productivity. Is that old data now, or?
There's a RAND study, it's probably the one that you saw if you looked about 3 years ago. And so I get ahead of the presentation, but the punchline is investment in disease management makes a couple of bucks per dollar. Investment in everything else that's not disease management does not make money. That's the bottom line. However, we come back to this point here around being an attractive employer, around what makes people want to stay. And when you think about engagement, all you guys, if you're in HR, we know about engagement, right? So what do we know engagement is? Engagement is 2 things. My willingness to contribute discretionary effort, in other words, I'm going to give you more than I otherwise would, and 2, my intent to stay. We'll talk about how we are influencing engagement. Those are my 2 measures. That's what we did at Pfizer, it's what we did at Aetna. Companies that I work with today, it's the same thing you look at. So workplace wellness programs could be putting your health data at risk. Oh joy, let's collect more data. The common cure for the corporate wellness program, the answer in that article in Harvard Business Review is stop doing it. But here's the thing. It is evolving, it is changing. Some of the presentations you're going to get later on today are great evidence of that. We talk about mindfulness, you talk about financial wellness. We're expanding this notion of it in powerful ways. Goldman Sachs has put a program into place. It's a mindfulness program. And think about, if you think about the typical Goldman Sachs folks, that's not what I'm thinking, that they're sitting back and going home. And turns out they're not. But they've got wellness programs that they are finding is giving them a competitive edge. Johnson & Johnson, and right not far from here in Florida, the Human Performance Institute has got a program for CEOs. That price tag, when this Bloomberg article came out, I said it was $100,000, they now charge $120. For $120,000, you can take your CEO and your CEO will go through this program that involves diet, exercise, wellness, leadership coaching, all the rest of this stuff, for $120,000. So companies will pay and will invest. And then really, and this gets, I think, to your point, this linking of wellness, morale, and the bottom line. So these are some of the challenges that we're talking about. The fundamental question is, do workplace wellness save employers money? And as asked and answered, not really. In fact, when you look at some of the latest studies that I looked at, the average return was $157 per employee of benefit, measurable benefit. And that wasn't even statistically significant. So it's a wash. So when your business bosses look at you and go, what's the return? If you say anything other than, or if you say it's financial, you're probably going to get called out. Point is that's not the full answer. Why do we do many of the things that we do in human resources? I've been in human resources for 30 years. Of course it's about the business, and of course it's about the bottom line. But it's more than that. So where we've been and where we're going. To prepare, everybody, I would like you to put both feet on the floor, hands on the tops of your legs, and with me, inhale fully, fill your lower belly, and then your center, and then you're up. Here we go. Slowly let it out through your nose, slowly. One more time, here we go. Slowly exhale, slowly through the nose, slowly through the nose, slowly through the nose, slowly through the nose. Because if you're going to talk about wellness programs back at your employer and how to get your business interested in them, you better take a breath. And that's one of the things that we do. Why did you come here today? I need 3 answers. Anybody? Why'd you come here today? Why here? To learn? Learn what?
New ideas.
New ideas. What else? Somebody else. Why'd you come here today?
Expand what we have going on right now.
Hmm?
To expand a little bit what we have going on.
Expand on what we've got going now? Okay. Somebody else. Why are you here?
3 credits.
CE credits, I'll take that. That's a good answer. That's right. That is an honest answer. So when we talk about workplace wellness, it's been quite a journey. If you go back several thousand years to Ayurvedic medicine, you had all kinds of practices that were designed to help people be more effective and more efficient. And then we've got traditional Chinese medicines here 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and ancient Greek medicines 500 years before, the Common Era. And then we've got about 2,500 years of employers saying, that's not my problem. That's your problem, employee. So you get a long expanse of employers basically just going, nope, no, not me. That began to change though. In the 1950s, we saw an evolution of employee assistance programs. That's before I was born. That's what they told me. In the 1960s, we had executive wellness programs. You guys ever watch Mad Men, that show? Right? You know, the executive wellness program is alcohol and tobacco largely, and then cocaine eventually. But in the 60s, what you also began to get is this focus on executive wellness, this awareness of employers. If I take care of the people at the top, maybe they'll give it better care of business. And then in the 70s, time management programs. The 1980s, stress management programs. 1990s, the whole concept of work-life balance began to show up. And mental health benefits began to emerge in employer-sponsored plans. Not before, about that time, because they began to realize these things are tied together. In the 2000s, we begin to get holistic health, and you begin to see the government get involved with recommendations. In the mid-2010s, worksite wellness starts showing up. Yoga, preventive care. In the 2010s, you start getting disease management. And that's when things start getting really interesting. So for example, are you going to submit to the metabolic testing so that you can get the discount on your premium? Interesting question. And then now you've got things like mindfulness and financial wellness. So it continues to evolve. What it is, back when the company took control of it again, insurance companies began to have more of a hand in it. And then, now it's back to you, the employee. So it continues to evolve. In the balance of wellness, there's $300 billion spent annually just in the United States. Wellness as an industry is a $6 billion industry. So my friends and I who are around the table all want you to hire us to help your employees be more well. And when I was in HR for all those years, I had you guys, the equivalent, knocking on the door saying, can we come in and do that? It's a big business. It's a real business. Here's the thing. This is what's measured. How much we spend and what it costs. But what we don't measure very well, or the impact on employees, on leaders, and teams. That we don't do. What does it cost you to have an unwell workplace? I have no idea. But does it cost you? That you know. How much you may not. When it comes down to suboptimal employees, research is pretty clear. These are all the different factors that drive burnout. But when I say burnout, we define that as cynicism, reduced personal efficacy, and emotional exhaustion. Do you know anybody who has any of these? Are you so, no. Burnout. Burnout, workplace anxiety, and you can see that you can read the science on it, the studies on it, has become the #1 driver of disease, is workplace stress. So when we talk about wellness, if we're not prepared to talk about stress, we need to fold our tent and go home, because there's not much else to talk about. Because stress is the driver of chronic disease. And chronic disease, as we said before, is what wellness programs can actually get a return on. The rest of it, it's all good. It may make you an employer of choice, and it may get people more engaged, and that's valuable in of itself. But if you're offering workplace yoga, and you think you're going to get a return on investment calculation for the finance person, you're not. You might, however, get a calculation of the people who participate and look at how they perform in the workplace. That might be interesting for you. Don't see studies on that. Watch. Somebody knows what this is because they said it already. Yeah, it is. How many of you guys do this every day in your workplace? No? Really? Of course not. If you did that, now I'll tell you, back in the day when I had the Asia beat for Pfizer, I would sit in my hotel room in Hong Kong and I could watch all of the workers do it outside in the morning. First time I saw it, I was like, what on earth are they doing? That's really cool. And they don't do it because it's just this thing. They do it because they know it works. So Tai Chi in the workplace, you know a provider that does that? It has an effect. Does it translate to the workplace? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your workplace. We'll tell some stories a little bit as we go along. But part of what this is, one of the biggest questions that you have to answer is what works in my shop? What works in my company? What will my CEO or my general manager or my boss, what will resonate with them? Because if you got an idea and it doesn't resonate with them and you can't find a way to connect it, you're not going to get anywhere, and you guys already know that. So lessons that are still being learned. These lessons come from my time at Pfizer, at Aetna, and even yet today. So I'm just going to kind of take you through them, and then we will take some conversation about it. So who takes advantage? Who takes advantage of yoga in the workplace?
The healthiest employee.
Yes! Yes! The person who was going to yoga anyway! Thank God I can go during the day and I don't have to go to work. Who should be going to yoga in the workplace? Not the person who's going. It's really, really interesting when you start looking about who takes advantage. When I was at Pfizer, we took a very bold step and we offered free prescription coverage to all employees, even for drugs we didn't make. No copay. Any drug. Now the gamble was, and this was the theory, is that if people didn't have to pay for it, they would take it. Guess what? They didn't take it. Any more than when they were paying for it. We were so amazed. We're like, this is, because this made headlines. We did this in like 2004. We said, okay, we're going to offer all our employees complete coverage. We ran advertisements about this. Like, not even for Pfizer drug. And we're like, people will take their medicine if they don't have to pay for it. No, they won't. How does that make sense? So eventually we stopped. 3 years we did it. Yes?
So did you find an increase in people that would take the brand name drug instead of the generic drug because it was less out of pocket? Like they didn't notice or care?
It was in the early 2000s, the difference between generic and branded wasn't as intense as it became 10 years later. So it didn't matter. Because we said, hey, if your doctor prescribes it, boom, we're paying for it, no copay. People would fill the prescriptions, then not take it. At the same rate they did when they paid a copay. To this day, we didn't understand. We still don't understand. How can that be? Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins did some real interesting studies, and this is for those of you that are thinking about mindfulness and fitness programs in your workplaces. And this is very similar to a place that my wife and I recently did. The study was of people who entered into these programs and what worked and what didn't. When it came down to compliance, what they found is that people who had some kind of accountability for reporting that they participated were actually participating. Yeah, come on. Actually participated. And actually got benefit. But if they didn't have to, if there was no sense of accountability, they didn't do it. The paradox of free is that if I don't have to pay for it, it must not be worth anything.
Yeah.
Really fascinating. And still very true. If you have no skin in the game, the programs that you're bringing to your employers, they have no skin in the game, nothing's going to happen. How many of you guys have healthy food options in your cafeterias or somehow subsidize that? Couple? Okay. You know who's in that line, right? Yeah. Yeah. Not the person that you know should be in the line. That person is not in the line. They're over there in the mac and cheese line. I don't know why, but they are. Actually, we do know why, but that's a very complicated conversation. So that's the paradox of free. Penalty or discount? How many of you guys have got a program that if you participate, you get a discount on your insurance premium? Okay. How's that work for you?
You participate.
People participate. How many? Don't know? Okay. All right.
It's not driving the results, I don't think.
No, in fact, what employers find is that about less than half people even do the screening. Now, there's some really interesting questions about that, right? Because metabolic data, I'll do the screening, you're going to get my blood sugar, you're going to get all this other information about me, and then a coach is going to call me, and then they're going to talk to me, and they're going to want to talk to me once a week, and I don't want to do any of that.
Right.
So I'm not going to do it. Who does do it? Well, what we do know is that the people who are unhealthy, who do it, that's where the money gets saved. When I said earlier, participation in those programs has a payback, those people pay it back. Because when they participate in the program, their adverse health events go down. Their metabolic results are better. Their body mass index, which is a horrible measure, but it's the one that they use, it gets better. So that's really the sweet spot.
I have something else to add
Yes.
to that, because the Cosmic does do a lot of the wellness, knowing your numbers, and we've actually sent people to the hospital where they didn't know their blood pressure was so off the charts, where they could have been the next large claim. So those
Yeah.
type of things do happen.
It does. It does. The question is how do you get people to participate? And that's when we talk about penalty or discount. There was a company several years ago, and I'm not going to say who they were, but you could have read about it. They said, well, we're going to have a penalty because if you don't, just like we, by the way, who discounts insurance for non-smokers? Anybody? Do you know? You may or may not. You know that's a thing though, right? I don't smoke, so I pay less for my insurance. Anybody think that's horribly unfair?
No?
Okay. I have metabolic characteristics of blood pressure or body mass or other measures that make me substantially higher cost to the health plan. Should they pay more for insurance? Don't answer. Because I don't want to moderate a fight. Because there are powerful arguments on both sides. The bottom line is that it's a powerful argument.
But
And if
one's
you-
avoidable and one isn't.
It could be genetic.
Oh, here we go! To your corners. That's why it's so difficult to talk about. Because everything that someone will say is to one degree or another true. It's all true. Healthcare is one of those conversations where we insist on an or, but the conversation is an and. Same thing with your wellness programs. You know it's real when executives get sick. The last company that I worked for before retired from corporate life was Aetna. The CEO there, a fellow named Mark Bertolini, had a had a skiing accident. It has affected him today. He's lost mobility in one of his arms, severely injured, is in intense pain all the time. Picked up the practice of mindfulness as a way to deal with his pain. And now, several years later, Aetna is one of those companies that is marquee, well known for having these kinds of practices for their employees because of the benefit. How did it happen? Because it happened to the CEO. One of my current clients, CEO of a nonprofit, looking to put breathing practices in place in the workplace. Why? Because she benefited from it. So to some degree, you know it's real when it's happening to somebody who is real. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can I go back to the penalty discount for
Yes, you bet.
smoker versus non-smoker? So what would be the reason for not having that penalty or discount? Because I would think that would motivate people. in my experience, my last company, we did motivate people to at least look into trying to quit smoking because it was a financial expense to them.
It is. And smoking is the smoker's penalty has been in place so long, well back into the 80s, early 80s, in terms of what company you check the box and rates go up, right? That people today, would not question it. Take the conversation to other, because you get the debate we had, but we almost had, thank you for not, on metabolic syndrome is that, well, it's genetic, or it's behavioral, or it's environmental, or it's all those things. Whereas smoking is kind of, you're smoking or you're not, right?
So the feeling today is every company, you don't get, from what you've heard, the negative feedback, hey,